Hi everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar. The purpose of the webinar today is to talk through the retirement of NBS Scheduler and to help you to transition over to NBS Chorus, our cloud-based specification platform. Today your speakers are me, Kate Brown, I'm Marketing Manager at NBS, Dr. Stephen Hamil, who is Innovation Director at NBS and has worked on the NBS tools for over 20 years. Stephen was actually lead software developer on NBS Scheduler back in 2001 when it launched. We also have Katie Fletcher, Technical Content QA Lead. Before moving into a current job, Katie worked as a NBS trainer for over 15 years and delivered thousands of training sessions, including many on NBS Scheduler. Before we get started, I'll run through some housekeeping. So the webinar will last around 45 minutes. Everyone's microphones are muted today, but you can ask questions using the question box, and we'll follow up with the answers after the session. Let's take a look at what we'll cover today. So Stephen will start off talking through the key dates and information for the retirement of NBS Scheduler. Then Katie will talk through the content library, the Chorus for Small Works. And then we'll finish off with Stephen demonstrating the key functionality of Chorus for Small Works. I'll now hand over to Stephen.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kate. Yeah, hi everybody. So yeah, the retirement of NBS Scheduler. So we just have a little look at the reasons why we chose to discontinue NBS Scheduler. I think firstly, the age of the software. So it was first started to be developed back in the 90s, and a lot of the components so no longer support on modern Microsoft operating systems. So we had a choice of either completely redeveloping it or seeing whether it would be possible to sort of transition our customers across to NBS Chorus Small Works. I think the second thing, adoption levels, when we look at over the last 20 years, how many customers moved onto NBS Scheduler, I think we never got over about 400 practices. And if you compare that with how many customers used the minor works offering, either binders and discs or in NBS Building and now Chorus, it was like more than twice as many. So in terms of what the market told us in terms of the right tools for specification purposes for jobs that were more simple natured, jobs defined by say JCT minor works or IBA concise contracts, that the traditional way of specification was a much more popular offering. And I think over the last 12 months, looking at customers moving across, the statistics have sort of proven that's been the case, with only 40 organizations that actually are using Scheduler last month, September 2021. We first communicated the retirement of Scheduler back around sort of 12 months ago, and we've got the page with all of the support information online. If you go to product retirement NBS, you can see more about that, and just sort of confirming that Scheduler will retire on 30th of November 2021. And after this date, support and access to the platform will end, having to export information out of there. If we just have a little look comparing the different approach to specification when using Scheduler compared to Chorus Small Work, it's a different method of specification. So on the screen at the moment, you can see a typical sort of construction in Scheduler that's made up of a number of work items. So some work items might talk about specific execution, maybe like removing plasterboard here, and then other work items which talk about the products that go together to form that construction. And it being a two-part specification, the sort of schedule of work with the construction and work items, and then the second part being the reference specification, which has all of the sort of standard links to standards and standard execution requirements, some general requirements. Now, I think one of the reasons why customers prefer the more sort of minor works or bridge level traditional sections is the sort of confusion between going between two documents, and also the length of the reference spec, which isn't necessarily fully project specific. So a lot of small contractors complaining about receiving two documents with the cross references, and also just the sheer length of a reference spec talking about lots and lots of products, lots of execution requirements which weren't relevant to that particular job. Whereas if we jump across and have a look at that same content, so same scope of content, in fact, Chorus SmallWorks has a larger scope of content. Those same specification clauses would be self-contained in a single M20 section. So there's a sort of more in-depth clause about removing defective plaster, clause 76. And then higher up the page here, clause 57, you can see you just need to specify the specific sort of product, and you can quite easily cross out the clauses that are irrelevant for that project. So you're getting a much more concise specification. 12 months ago, when we did lots of focus groups, we did the webinar, we said, look, how can we help on the transition? And the first thing was the sort of transition of all of the content for things like alteration, refurbishment, which Katie's going to touch on in a moment. And then we also heard it would be fantastic if we can have a little bit of support for costing a job, especially jobs where there's no bill of quantities, no cost consultant on the project. And also an easier way to cross-reference drawings for companies that aren't using tools like Revit, but are maybe using Revit LT or want to sort of work with a Keynote file. So we'll show that in a second. Where we'd like maybe a little bit of feedback is if you still want to write a very sort of lightweight schedule that cross-references the main spec sections, how could we possibly support you more there? Like at the moment, I imagine it'd be possible maybe write that in Word or Excel and cross-reference to the main spec. But we can sort of pop that feedback at the end of the session once we've done the demonstration of Chorus SmallWorks. So moving on from the content, just a little bit about the pricing side of things. We've got a technical article on on small jobs where you haven't got a bill of quantities, the different options on things for things like JCT or IBA contracts. We'll send that through at the end, and also a little bit more on what we've done to help you with drawing annotations as well. Got content there in our support area, and I'll demonstrate that later on. So what we're going to do now is have 10-15 minutes with Katie Fletcher, who's going to go through some content examples, and then I'll be passing back to myself to go through some of the functionality in Chorus SmallWorks. So over to you, Katie.
Oh, thank you very much, Stephen. I've now started to share a Chorus screen with a number of projects on, and I wanted to introduce this a little bit before I launch into a specification that I've created with some examples in. As Kate said, I have been working with the NBS for 17 years, a trainer for the first 15, and for the last 2 working with the content team, the technical authors, and also helping across on the support side of things as well. And I wanted to give an example of what the SmallWorks content shows, but I also wanted to give a little bit of a background on what it was that was happening in the development of the SmallWorks. So in Scheduler, you had, as Stephen said, 2 parts to it, well, 3 parts, including the preliminaries. You had a reference specification and you had the schedule of work. What we've done is evaluate all of that content and review whether or not it would be a good idea to add that content into our SmallWorks library, if it was valuable to us, if it was going to be useful for customers, and would they get the best out of it. And as a result, what we were able to do was assess the content in both the schedule and the reference specification, and have added, amended and modified some of that cause content to create the SmallWorks library. But we see it as a starting point. We see it as something that we're going to be continuing to develop by looking at the extensive and current subject of refurbishment, conservation, retrofitting, etc., as well as the increasingly critical and important topic of sustainability and the responsible specification of materials, etc. So this is a great start. We've been able to get the content reviewed and bring it up to speed in this SmallWorks library. So on the screen, the NBS Chorus screen, I've got a project called SmallWorks Refurbishment in the bottom left-hand corner, which I'm going to open. And inside it, I've got some example specifications. We've got flat refurbishment, and I've put core small works next to it, and the prelims version. I'm going to come back to prelims in a little bit because it would be worth having a look to see what that content looks like. But if I open up my flat refurbishment specification, I've added a number of sections already into this, and some of these I'm going to open as an example. We have the code in the center, so that is the common arrangement of works or cores section codes. And I just wanted to just share with you an overview of what those common arrangement of work sections represent. So you may not be aware, if you've used Scheduler before, you know that they exist, but you may not be appreciative of the logic behind it. So we've got the A sections are the preliminaries, a B as complete buildings, structures and units. And then we have C, D, E, F, etc. up to P, including things like demolition, alteration, renovation, masonry, windows, doors, stairs, surface finishes, etc. The Q section, which is commonly associated with landscape content, and then R through to Y would be the services library. So as I said, there's a logic to it. The examples I've chosen for our small works specification today are samples of typical things that you might expect to see as part of a specification, but also demonstrate some of the content that we want to show representing refurbishment, retrofitting, etc. So just minimize that for a second. So I'm going to start with the obvious one of demolition, which is C20. If I open that one, I have C20 open in the center, and it's got a lot of clauses within it that represent things like demolition, but also if we go through it, we've got things like deconstruction, features to be retained. We set this up with several items specific to our project. So we're saying that gates and gate pillars are to be retained, or railings are to be retained, or a canopy over the entrance doors. There are clauses contained in here representing disconnection. I'm clicking on a couple of these clauses as I go through because the guidance is always relevant to that content, much more detailed guidance than you would have got with the reference specification or the work items in Scheduler. There are links externally to standards and regulations and other documents, and if you have access to the Construction Information Service, you can utilize those. But also there is all of this content is updated regularly by the authors, so it's being looked into and added to all the time. So if I keep going through, I've got a representation of a clause where we have added a suffix to it. So this one was disconnection of the drains, and in the car park was the suffix which identifies a location. One of the things that one could do within Scheduler was to identify things by location or tag it with a location, if you like, as well as the BCIS or even the Uniclass based templates that were included. So wanted to emphasize the fact that one has that option of making your clauses very specific. So the great functionality of behind the scenes on this one allows you to duplicate as many clauses as you like. You can add your own clauses, you can amend them. If you don't want them, you can park them up so that they're not included or printed. And you have the control over that. So it's got lots of detail in here. So more things to do with structures being retained, etc. So I'm going to close that section now and look at a different one instead. So the one I'm going to look at now is N11, which is domestic kitchens, fittings, furnishings and equipment. If this was a flat refurbishment, it might be that the kitchen and the bathroom are being stripped out before the new tenant arrives. This demonstrates the fact that you can take an existing clause and you can park up almost every part of it. In fact, you could do every part of it, I would imagine, but that would be somewhat pointless. But actually not so, because one could completely take out all of the content that had been authored by us and add everything of your own values. In this particular case, we've got fitted base units and wall units as the title of the clause, and we've added existing to be removed onto the end there to flag exactly what that's for and a bit more detail in the description box. So this clause, fitted base units and wall units for kitchens, is one demonstrating how one can use the products area of NBS Chorus, which has added a manufacturer's name and their address and some other details with their website and email address, etc., and parked up any of the items that are not required for this part of the specification. In a flat refurbishment, you might be just doing a single part, like replacing the worktops or fitting a new radiator or a single window. And you can strip this all the way down to a single clause, as I mentioned before. It might be multiple versions of the same thing, so you could, as I said, repeat the clause several times. Okay, so I'm going to have another look at a similar kind of clause in the N group, which is furniture and equipment, and this one is sanitary appliances and fittings. And the reason that I've picked this one is because I wanted to think about retrofitting, how one might be installing something to improve a flat's furniture, including adding dock end packs to the unisex accessible WC equipment packages, etc. So there are clauses representing those. There's the shower pack in there. Again, guidance available for all of this information on the right-hand side, including links to regulations and standards that are available. There also is further reading information and links to other sites like BREEAM content, etc. If I want to keep going through, again demonstrating the fact that you can park up as many clauses as you like. None of these are going to print, these ones for urinals and bidets and sinks, etc. So you can cut your sections down to just the bare minimum that you require for your project, and then just increasingly just add in as much as you like. Again, I mentioned the fact that you could find a single item that one needed in your specification. I've picked out shower heads here. So if you're just replacing a shower head, you can go right the way down to that single item if one needs to do that. Okay, so on beyond N13, I wanted to pick up Q50. And the reason I picked up Q50 was we were imagining our block of flats being refurbished and lots of the internal stuff was covered. But what about something that's slightly out of the ordinary? In this case, I imagined a sculpture being added. So I've picked up Q50, which is site, street, furniture and equipment. And I've added a clause for a bespoke sculpture. So this was a clause that previously didn't exist. It was just a basic section without this particular clause in, and then we've built this and we're up from scratch. And so I added that in as I went through. So just the rest of the clauses, apart from the ones to do with foundations and setting things in concrete, remain in there. Okay, so hopefully I've managed to show some examples of sections that have refurbishment and retrofitting, and also replacement and modifying content that you can deal with your own way, but again to emphasize the fact that you have the flexibility to add in what you need, take out what you don't need, repeat yourself if you need to for multiple products or multiple alternative locations, etc. Whatever you need to do, you've got the flexibility within this. I'm going to switch now back to the overview of my project, and I'm going to just open the preliminaries specification that I mentioned earlier on. So click onto that one, and as you'll see, it is exactly the same content that one would have with your scheduler version of the prelims. It looks very similar. You've got section titles at the top and individual clauses, and we've amended these clauses to suit our project alteration and refurbishment, making good and getting the place ready for new tenants, etc. One thing I wanted to mention before I finished looking at the prelims was that there will be the inclusion of the measured term contract later on in the year, as that also was included as part of the scheduler library of prelims. So that will be coming along in the near future. So hopefully I've covered most examples of the options you've got within your specification to add your own content, to adapt the clauses that are there, to take advantage of the guidance and the information held within, to cater for pretty much anything one needs to do as far as writing your specification. And I'm now going to hand back over to Stephen to close off the next section.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katie. So now the third part of the presentation is going to be from myself, and we'll look at Chorus Small Works and we'll look at the functionality. Yeah, so on the screen at the moment is NBS Chorus Small Works. Some slightly different projects here because this is I've logged in as Stephen as opposed to before where Katie was logged in as herself. And the first thing to mention is just that it's a modern web cloud platform that works on all devices. So a lot over the years, especially from small practices, we've heard that it's a pain that NBS only ever worked on a Windows PC. I think now it works great on a Mac, but also if you're on an iPad, if you're visiting a site and if you've just got your sort of handheld phone or what have you, you've got that same sort of experience on smaller size screens as well. So as long as you've got 3G connection, you just come in, log in, and you can see your project. To create a new project, you just once logged in, click the Create Project button. And here's a project that I've sort of previously created. And you put a little bit of metadata to set it up, which will be on the document cover page when you actually sort of print out the spec. So what I'm going to do is just demonstrate creating a set of prelims and then creating a technical specification. So I think the first thing to think about is who in your organization is going to access the project. So you might work at a small practice with 4 or 5 colleagues. You might have 2 or 3 that are going to work on this project. It's a bit like working with Dropbox or Google Drive. You just sort of put the email address in. So pick the person that you want to also access the project and define what their role is. You can maybe have read-only access or make them an admin or contributor, and that'll sort of build up the project team working on that project. And then you can start adding specifications to the project. So I'll start off by doing a set of prelims. So in the software, the main call to actions are normally the sort of dark green button. So whenever you see a page of that, that's the sort of typical button that you click on. And there's loads of software help and sort of self-serve training material up on the help window at the top. So click to add a spec. I'm going to create a set of prelims. And I'm going to use the UK prelims NBS library that's structured in the common arrangement of work sections, and then choose my contract. You see that the contracts without the lock sign are the ones included in the small works library. So for example, you've got JCT minor works, you've got JCT intermediate, but you haven't got the major project library. But as you grow as a practice, you can maybe upgrade your subscription and use the full content set. But what I'm going to do today is just pick one of the RIBA contracts, RIBA concise building contract. And when you click save, it's going to go through and add all of those sections, the sections that you're already familiar with from NBS Scheduler. So you can see there from A10 all the way down. And if you want to open one of these, it opens in the editor. And what you're going to see there in the editor is the table of contents on the left-hand side that you can order by code, last modified, A to Z. You've got the editor in the middle. And on the right-hand side, you have your NBS technical guidance. And as you come into a clause and modify it, you get the option to sort of discard any changes or save any changes to the database. So as Katie mentioned, you don't have to include every single clause. If you don't want to include a clause, you can cross it out. If you come in to a clause and you don't want to include any of the rows, you can come and park that off. And if you want to add your own item, you can come in here and insert a row. And just type in here. And then when you're happy, click save. And within the actual inserts themselves, let's go to A32 here, just have a scan down. You can include sort of rich text. So let's come in here and I'll remove 260. I'll come into the photographs. One here, you get drop-down values, which are relevant to the guidance here as well. And for example, here I could put a few options in. So carriage returns, which I don't think is available in scheduler prelims. You can change the format in a bit, so I can make that bullet points, make items bold, and also include hyperlinks as well. And any hyperlinks that you put in will transfer through to the PDF as well. So if it's a hyperlink in the editor, it becomes a hyperlink in the PDF when the contractor or the client receives that. So we've put together our prelims, we've gone through and edited the clauses. If I want to publish that as a PDF, I come to this level here. If I come actions publish, it'll publish every single section in the specification. If I use the tick boxes on the left-hand side here, so let's do so A32, A33, it'll just publish those two sections. So let's just do that quickly. You get two choices on publication. You can go to the sort of standard out-the-box NBS PDF, or you can go to Microsoft Word if you want to do any sort of post-processing. But we'll just do PDF for this demonstration. And it takes, 9-10 seconds, and it'll generate a sort of professional-looking PDF with some of the project metadata, some of the section metadata, and obviously the content in the PDF itself. So there's your cover page with some of the project details on. And as you go down, you see a table of contents confirming the sections in that. And then there's internal bookmarks to sort of jump down to the clauses themselves. And as I come down a little bit further here, there was that particular, I think I removed clause 250. And for clause 280 there, you can see where I picked from the drop-down values. And you can also see the sort of formatted insert there, complete with hyperlink as well. So that's the basics in terms of creating a spec, assembling the work sections that you need, making any edits, and then publishing it to a PDF at the end. I'll now go back and create a technical specification, show how you can pick from the work section library. So add a spec again, go and create a technical specification. I'm going to use the work sections this time as opposed to the prelims library, and create that. So in terms of adding content, you can just do a sort of free text search. So if I was wanting to add doors and windows, I can just search for the topic, and in an order of relevance, it returns the sections that are available. And you can click here and sort of, if it's the right section for your job, add it in. So let's just add a few of these in. So I'll put the ironmongery in the window section and the general glazing, and then search for doors as well. And I'll add the L20 in for doors. So you're building up the different sections of the spec. If you want to go through the different groups as a sort of checklist to make sure you don't miss anything out, there's a little search tip here, which is quite a useful one. But if you hover over search tips here, it says put code at the start. It's similar to how Windows Explorer, Google works, where you've got more of a sort of power search, but you put code at the top here. And then that's going to show the sections in Group B. If I change that to C, it's going to show all the sections in Group C. So you can quickly scan down there and think, yeah, I'll add some demolition. I need to do some repairing work to the masonry, and we need alteration of the spot items, and they just drop into your specification as the sort of table of contents here. And then when you open it, it's very similar to what we saw for the prelims, where you get a big checklist of clauses covering the scope of content for door shutters, hatches. And at the top of the page, it tends to be around the products and materials. So different doors, etc. And at the bottom, eventually, you get down to some of the sort of execution clauses and things like fixings and sealants, etc. at the bottom. So that was doors and hatches, here's windows. And the idea is to remove what isn't relevant to the project. There's no point in creating a specification that's hundreds and hundreds of pages talking about whatever wood windows if there's only aluminium windows in the job. So have a look at the clause, read the guidance, any relevant guidance links on the right-hand side, and remove the clauses that aren't relevant for that job. So I'm getting rid of the wood windows and the steel windows because I know there's maybe 2 or 3 types of aluminium windows on this job. And then you can come in and pick from the relevant drop-down values and remove the rows that aren't relevant to the job, and specify the right decision for your project for the items that are relevant. Just like the example of the prelims, if you want to put new content in, you just click the 3 dots on the left-hand side and type what's relevant. And just like we saw earlier, if you want to make something bold or italic or hyperlink it, you just sort of double click on the text and you get this nice little toolbar that drops up. On most projects, you quite often get different types of the same thing. So for aluminium windows, you might say have 2, 3 types. This little pencil on the right-hand side allows you to put either a prefix before the title or a suffix after the title. So I could write something like type A inside there, or I could write to front elevation or what have you, or give it a little sort of coding system. So I'm going to call this the window system 001. And what you'll see is that that comes just after the title. I could have had it just before the title if I'd chosen to fill in the prefix. And that's the content that you'll use if you're cross-referencing this on maybe a schedule you've created, or with cost spreadsheet or annotations from drawings. So if I wanted to create another aluminium window now with maybe a different thermal performance or from a different manufacturer, a different configuration, I can come to the 3 dots and say duplicate this item. And what that's going to do is take the content of clause 25 there and just drop it underneath. And initially it's going to have exactly the same content, but it's now ready for you to come in and modify. So I can come in and maybe give different performance criteria there. And what you might notice is it's automatically incremented the type number. So that's gone from WNS001 to WNS002. And the third way, I guess, or the alternative way of adding content in here, that's more than just the generic content, is by picking from the manufacturer library, the NBS source content that's included inside of NBS Chorus. So if I click in any row which says manufacturer or supplier, then the NBS guidance toggles to the NBS source products. So you see here, as a search for more manufacturers, compare products in NBS source, which you can click and jump across to NBS source. But you can see here for aluminium windows, there's a whole host of products and aluminium windows accessories to pick from. So I come here and pick this one from Schuko, have a little look, read the application. So yeah, luxury residential jobs. That's right for my project. Look at a lot of the technical characteristics. And if that's right for your project, you just click the plus button and that'll drop straight in. So that's came in as an additional clause now, WNS 003, but with the Schuko content, as opposed to the previous example where you duplicated the clause. This is now coming in with a sort of duplication of the Schuko content as opposed to the generic content from Win System 3. Now, if you chose the Schuko one instead of this clause, you can just park that away, or it might be in addition. You sort of leave that in. But for the Schuko example here, the options that you get. So I come down here. These are the options from the manufacturer itself. So if I came down here to the quoting options, these aren't the NBS authored options. These are the options that have been authored by that particular manufacturer. And there's a whole host of technical information there provided from that manufacturer. And then it would be a case of once you've completed the spec, coming here and printing it all out, or they're putting together in packages. You might have a package that's got the windows and the doors and the ironmongery together, and publishing just that. So what I'm going to do now, I've gone through all of the basics in Chorus itself, is show how it integrates with the design process. And I'm going to do a demonstration in Revit, first of all, showing the Revit plugin, where it works side by side with Chorus. And then I'll show the Keynote export, which works with Revit LT, or could be post-processed for other CAD tools. So I'm going to jump across and go to Revit. And what you can see here is like I'm not brilliant at Revit. I'm not a designer either, but I put together a very simple building with 3 or 4 rooms in and 2 or 3 types of window. So what I'm going to do is just demonstrate using the Revit plugin for Revit full version. This is also available for ArchiCAD and Vectorworks, pretty much exactly the same customer experience, how we can link up the objects in the design model, the 3D design model, with the clauses in the spec. So what I'm seeing on the right-hand side is exactly the same content as what I saw through the web browser. So here's the project, the new house. There's the prelims, there's the technical specification. And what I'm going to do is link the design model with the specification. And we do that through the 3 dots on the right-hand side there, associate with model. And that's creating the link between the 3D model with the specification data in the cloud, which is protected through your sort of login up here. Only like Stephen at this fictitious company, Hamil Design, can access it with their password. And then it's a case of going to the objects in Revit and associating them with the corresponding specification clause. So let's click on this window here. You can see it also being highlighted below here in the schedule. So this is instance 12 on floor 1 or what have you. It's as simple as coming down here now. Let's just order it by code and saying I'd like to associate that particular window with, just expand this out, window clause 2. You'll notice that the steel, the timber windows are hidden away because they were parked, and you can just see the type 1, type 2, and type 3 window. You click associate, and that's created the link, associate successfully. You'll see in the schedule here that every instance of that type now has the value of WNS02 against it. So it's a type level, not an instance level when you make that link. And let's just come to this window as well. So down here, I'm going to associate that with the window system 3. So same again, click to associate the model. You'll see window system 2 is already linked with this little icon. And I'm going to link that one, model association successful. And you can see WNS003, right classification code, the right title in there. And what that means now is whenever you click on one of these windows, it's going to pop up on the right-hand side, and you can actually write, assemble, edit your specification at the same time as doing your design in this sort of immersive, connected environment. It's the same if I click on something in the sort of like floor plan or section view as well. So there's window system 3, come across here, there's window system 2. And you can use these parameters inside the sort of multi-category annotations as well. So I come here and say multi-category tag. Let's see the project. And I've set up the tags to have those parameters in, and you can see you just sort of drop the tagging in there now. if you were to change one of these, so I'll come here instead of 002, this is now say 2B, you make that change, you get notified that it's out of sync with the drawings. So I come down to the model, it's telling me I've got an issue. You go and see what the issue is, and it's telling you that the parameters don't match. It's called 2B here. It's called 2 in the spec in the annotations there. You just click fix, and that's going to bring everything back in line again. So if you watch what happens in the 002s down here and 002s here, I click fix all. It brings everything back into sync again. So that covers the Revit full experience. If we want to see Revit LT, let's just demonstrate this quickly here. You can come into the technical spec area, come to actions, export the keynote, and that's going to, instead of it being sort of fully coordinated, it's going to take a snapshot at a point of time where maybe you've got the specification to the place you want it to be, and it exports a keynote file for you to then use inside of Revit itself. So if I come back here now, instead of using the multi-category tag, you can use the keynote functionality and sort of pick from the items in that text file. So if I have a little look in here, you can see you've got the values that have came from the specification in a little text file. It's not as integrated as what you're seeing the full plugin, but if you're using Revit LT, the keynoting is quite a nice, tidy way to work as well. So I think the last thing I'd like to show is the export to the financial summary. So let's just drop back into a Chorus again. And we've had a look at the keynote export. We've had a look at the publish specification. There's other things as well, but export financial summary. If we just have a little look at what that does. It's structured by common arrangement of work section, not BCIS, but and this is how the sort of minor works customers have worked for a long time. You get a list of the sections in an Excel spreadsheet. So instead of it like being sort of paper way in cache columns, you've got like Excel where you can actually work with like real data, and we've got calculations in here. So straight away it sums up the values here. And as you put totals in, at the bottom here, you'll see it does the maths. So you can imagine sending this out, the specification and the Excel spreadsheet to tenders, and you're getting it all back in a sort of standard format and digital format in Excel. Like you can go to a greater granularity if you want, go clause by clause, but over the years, users have told us that contractors and small jobs maybe don't want to break it. Maybe once they've won the job, then you ask them to do a sort of deeper breakdown. But maybe initially you want to do it at a section level. And then if you do want to break it down even further, we've got a full export of all the content here. So you can do a bit of like manipulation. And if you wanted to have like all of those windows types under L10, you can do that. We've seen architects work sort of in both ways, a sort of broad brush or going down to each sort of individual product clause. But what we've done here is sort of pushed all the data out, and we leave that to yourself. So I'm going to hand it back to Kate Brown in a second, but hopefully that's been useful seeing content examples from Katie, and then just a real sort of quick demonstration of all of the main functionality parts, putting a spec together, editing it, publishing it, integrating it with the design environment, and also exporting it for maybe a sort of financial summary that goes alongside the spec for tendering. So back to you, Kate.
Thank you, Stephen and Katie. Before we finish today, I just wanted to talk through some of the content and resources that might be useful to you. So within the case study section on our website, we've got a number of case studies, and two that I wanted to show you are one from J. Foster Architects, who is a London-based practice founded by Jeremy Foster, and they recently moved from Scheduler to Chorus. And they're finding Chorus really beneficial to their projects, and one of the key features that Jeremy spoke about was the fact that it's cloud-based. So he can use the Chorus on his desktop PC in the studio, and then he can go home and finish his specification on his Mac. We also have one from Mulroy Architects, who again moved from Scheduler to Chorus earlier this year. One of the key benefits that they're enjoying is the collaborative features that NBS Chorus offers, particularly the specification notes feature, which enables you to collaborate with the team directly in the specification. You read these case studies and all the other ones on our website. I'll share the URL at the end. Other support that we've got includes the Help Center within Chorus. So here you can find support articles and videos. You can complete e-learning modules. And you can also log a support request for one of our customer support team to get back to you. And there is a community forum within this area where you can make a suggestion for a future development or vote up other people's suggestions. We also have the NBS Academy, which is the home for all of our training, content and resources. So if you think you'd benefit from a more tailored training session, visit the Academy and take a look at the range of different courses we offer, and they're all delivered in a format that suits you. So whether that be online or if you prefer face-to-face. And here are the important links that you might want to jot down. So we have the custom stories URL at the top there, where you can find software support, and then the Academy at the bottom there. If you do have any specific questions about the retirement or the software, you can also contact your NBS account manager or email the mailbox success@thembs.com, and there's our phone number. I'll share a copy of this webinar in the follow-up email, which should be with you in an hour or two. But thank you again for joining, and we'll speak to you soon.